Pastor Don and I say this I say this a lot, and I will probably continue to repeat this statement for as long as I live because it was completely and totally freeing for me. We were standing up here talking one night before praise and worship. It was before we started prayer and praise. We've been doing this now 2.5 years for prayer and praise on Friday nights. And it was before we started, we were talking about the purpose of prayer and praise. She goes, what would it look like? Because we were talking about worship and being up in front of people, because when you're up here worshiping God, there's a lot of things that roll through your head. There's trying to make sure that you're reading the lyrics correctly, that you're somewhat on key, that your timing is correct. And I told Mom, I said, sometimes when I worship God, I'm scared. I don't want to be spotlighted. I don't want to showboat anything. I said, so sometimes I wonder if I'm being too loud, or I'm moving too much, or I'm jumping too much, or then I find myself and we sing like this. Because our mind gets into it not being a distraction for others. We don't want to be arrogant in it. We don't want to show attention to ourselves. We're supposed to be attention to God. And all those thoughts come into play. And so when we're praising and worshiping God, we find ourselves standing still. And we find ourselves singing really low key. And so we were standing right here, and she goes, what would it look like for you in your personal life and in your life? What would it look like if you worshiped God without fear? And I was like, I don't have a clue what that would look like. I don't know what it would look like for me to truly raise my hands like this and praise God with everything in me without worrying about, stuff, the stuff that sticks in your head, like, do I have a sweat stain? Is my shirt coming untucked? Did it pass the worship test? All of those things that come in your mind, which you should test that at home. But what would it look like that you're not thinking about what somebody else thinks about, what you're not thinking about what happened earlier in the day? If you could worship God, if you could truly give Him thanksgiving with everything in you without worrying about somebody else's thought pattern. And I stood right here, I'm like, I don't know what that would look like. And it was a couple church services, a couple Friday nights into it, and I had my spot right here. I don't remember the song. I don't remember the night. I don't remember what was happening. But for a split second, for about halfway through that song, everyone in this room disappeared. There was nobody else up here. There was nobody else in the room. It was just me and God. And I understood in that split second, call it a vision, call it a dream, call it a whatever it is, kind of thing. In that moment, I felt like I could worship God without any fear because nothing else mattered but Him. In that thankfulness and that gratitude and that gratefulness to be alive. And at the end of the song, everything flooded back in. I've been pursuing that ever since. Trying to find those moments. And there's little bitty glimpses of that happen during worship that you just forget everything else around you. And you're like, okay, God, it's just me and you. Whether or not you're raising your hands, whether or not you're at the altar, whether or not you're face first on the floor, it really doesn't matter. What it's going to be to you is going to be to you. But there's this movement of using our voices, this action, that you push aside everything else to worship God for who He is, to be thankful and grateful for who He is.